Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Right, welcome to delayed start of the panel discussion. Right. I hope all of you here are aware of what the topic is. Any thoughts on the topic? Right, I come from an academic background, so my session starts with an interaction. Right, it's not one-way dialogue. Right. How many of you understand this topic? Can I have a raise of hand? Have a brief idea about what we are going to discuss? Because amongst us, we were discussing and trying to see what this topic is. We are trying to decipher it. We also had a pre-panel discussion a few minutes prior to this panel actually starting and even a day before. And we were interested in demystifying and also deciphering the topic, right? So being the moderator, I thought I should give you an overarching picture about what this topic is, right? From the historical perspective, we have been focusing on rural a lot, right? Go back to your social science subjects, social studies, history, civics, political science. You have been discussing about rural. But in the modern time, there have been specific efforts made to understand rural. And one specific intervention is on annual survey of industries, which happens regularly, right? It's an annual survey, it has to happen annually. So the last survey happened somewhere in 23-24, which stated that the manufacturing sector in rural area is actually better performing in terms of output, in terms of wage rate, in terms of participation of labor in the rural areas, right, as compared to the urban. And there have been multiple work, both research, think tank based, as well as practice oriented work, which has been trying to understand what is this, why is this phenomena happening. And people very nicely quoted a statement known as urban-rural manufacturing shift. NABARD, which is a title sponsor for this event, also undertakes a lot of working paper, which is a research effort. And a couple of papers actually talk about the need for looking at manufacturing sector in a redefined, in a reignited, revamped manner. And somewhere they mentioned the term rural manufacturing 2.0, right? Is 1.0 yet completed? What is 1.0? That is one of the probable themes that we will try to look at. And when the focus of rural manufacturing came up in the country, it mushroomed in different locations. So we had clusters of entities coming up, right? Take, for example, Manesar cluster, known for automotive, right? Supported by Hero Honda Group and the Maruti Suzuki era, right? Look at Tirupur Group for garments. And as these clusters became much bigger, people said, okay, they're not standalone MSME players. They're actually a group of entities working on a specific theme or domain. Now, since we are looking at the next 50 years, 100 years of our country, maybe 100 years of our independence in 2047, we are at a junction, which is like a pivotal point, where we are supposed to look at rural manufacturing along with MSME clusters 2.0 and look at the MSME clusters that I mentioned. Take, for example, the Manesar cluster or the Tirupur cluster. It's not just for our own consumption. We are also aiding in a lot of global value chain. So we become a very important linchpin in the whole value chain. And looking at this context, I just gave an overview of the whole theme. The topic for the panel is on rural manufacturing and MSME clusters 2.0, where we are looking at building the local to global value chains, right? With this, I invite maybe any one of you to volunteer to begin with your thoughts on the subject and what do you think is relevant as on 20th November 2025, looking at the topic. Any one of you?
Yeah, I can go first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nakul, for bringing up the topic and studying the context. I think rural manufacturing, when you look at it, I think what kind of development that we had seen primarily in the last 15 years with a lot of digital technology and evolution, and also the consumer technology, things have changed dramatically. At the same time, all these entrepreneurs in the rural parts of the country, they're enterprising in nature as well. And then not just the people who are living in the big cities in the country, even people living in the rural parts of the country have also sort of had life-changing experiences in terms of using technology, right? From e-commerce is reaching to the last miles of the country, right? So the enterprises across the rural and the last miles of the country have definitely started exploring how technology can make changes or bring changes in their own enterprises as well. Now, when you're talking about manufacturing 2.0, but if you look at from an industry revolution perspective, industry 4.0 is something that brought in a lot of changes across the globe, right? I think, see, the intervention for any organization, especially let's talk about rural manufacturing. If I probably have to put rural manufacturing, largely, I think I see two buckets. One is the agri businesses, and other is probably handicrafts, right? I think these constitute a large percentage of rural manufacturing sector. When you look at them, I think the industry 4.0, when the technology is one aspect that comes in at the level of a manufacturing part, followed by once the product obviously comes out, then there is a lot of dependency on the supply chain itself. Now how the intervention of technology can happen both at the manufacturing level and the supply chain, I think this is where I see a lot of developments happening. And post, of course, the supply chain, there is also how you make sure that the cash flows are managed, and this is whole challenge of how these supply chains work in the manufacturing sector is primarily around how the credit is managed, right? And then the last part of it is the fact that what's in it for the future, right? And I think I see broadly how these rural manufacturing as such, that's going to evolve by having technology on one side of it, and other side of it, how the whole lot of the ecosystem will support from a government and the others. But then the middle piece, which is the supply chain or the value chains, which play a major role, where technologies, a lot of technologies coming into the picture, right from the blockchain on the traceability side to the lot of other technologies. In fact, I represent a company which also brings in a technology intervention at the supply chain level. I think with that, I think maybe I'll probably pass it on, but that's quite an overview I can bring in now.
Absolutely.
But we can dive deeper as we move forward. Yeah.
Thanks. Is this working? Thanks, Nakul, and thanks, Winny, for that context. So look, I look at it slightly differently. I look at it more from the farmer's point of view, because that's what I do. I work in agriculture. I work with a lot of the farmer communities, and what we see generally is that we are a country of smallholder farmers. We are not a country where we have one farmer doing 1,000 acres using drones and airplanes to fertilize their farms, to irrigate their farms. We are a country of smallholder farmers. So we have to look at it in that context. All these new age tech, remote sensing, blockchain, all of these are very useful, I believe, but more from an administrative or governance point of view. From an implementation point of view, from a scale point of view, you have to look at it from their context. And their context is that currently they are selling at MSP. They are even struggling at MSP, let me put it like that. What we have to see is how can we create value at the farm level? How can we create value at the agriculture farm plot level? And that is where your point is sort of very valid. And the title of this panel, where we shouldn't just look at it from a manufacturing point of view. We should look at it from a value creation point of view. That could be manufacturing, it could be processing, it could be packaging, it could be polishing, or whatever a farmer can do to turn that 1 kg of tur dal from 20 rupees into 40 rupees or 30 rupees. I think that is where we are sort of focusing on also as a nation. I don't want to comment on how far we are getting there, but there are efforts both at the state and the central level. We are seeing new subsidies and schemes coming into play, like the MIDH, the PMFME, and several others, where the farmers are incentivized to set up farm plot level or village level processing units and manufacturing units. And I think that is where us as an ecosystem, we need to really see how we can connect them to the market. Because to produce and to process is one part of it, but to connect to the market is really where they struggle. So if either the government or us as an ecosystem, and I speak also on behalf of my institution, if we can focus on connecting these smallholder farmers or these clusters to the market, I think that is where we will really be able to create value or really handhold them from one economic standpoint to another. Now, having said that, we are also seeing a lot of private sector initiatives, private sector enterprises do this successfully. one or two examples, if I were to share, there's this enterprise called S4S. S4S recently won the Earthshot Prize. Very few people know about it. What does S4S do? They create these solar-powered processing machines. All of us eat these ready-to-eat noodles, right? So they have these masala sachets, and in those masala sachets, we see these dehydrated matars and gajars and other things. So where do those come from? Those come from those solar-dried panels. Now, the model that S4S follows is that it sells these solar processing units to the women of the village, and they create what they call women entrepreneurs or local entrepreneurs, whatever other term you want to use for that. They supply them with the locally sourced produce, and they buy back their processed material and they supply it to the Chings and Nestles of this world. Now, I think these are the kind of examples that we need to pick up and learn from and scale. There are several others. I'm just giving you one for context. And I think that is where perhaps we could also think through as an ecosystem how some of these larger tech options or these larger tech alternatives can integrate into these rural value chains. And it is not just processing. That is one example. You look at the whole value chain. You start from advisory. How can perhaps an Amnex give a very customized, tailor-made advisory to a farmer? Going from advisory, you go into inputs. How can the farmer, now we're hearing about regenerative agriculture, natural farming, etc. And a lot of the inputs that they use for such style of farming, they don't need to come from the buyers and the HULs of this world. They can be locally produced, they can be locally processed, they can be locally manufactured and supplied. And that is happening, but that is happening in small pockets. We need to see how we can professionalize that, how we can, I don't want to use the word corporatize, but how we can bring that to a scale where one cluster can cover at least one block or one district, so that they can attract investment, they can attract funding. Similarly, other aspects of the value chain like logistics, warehousing, and all of these have, by the way, government-driven subsidies which help them sort of set it up, operate, etc. So I think, to my limited opening remark, I would stick to the fact and summarize that we need to see how we can turn the farmer from an utpadak into an udyami, from a producer into a businessman. I mean, I don't want to get into jingoism, but broadly that is the gist of my overall belief, that if you can teach the farmer or work with them to see how we can turn that 1 kg of wheat or tur dal into a processed good, that is, I think, where we should be looking at.
Over to you, Srinivasa.
Yeah, good afternoon all. Nakul, thank you for having me, and I'm very honored and pleasure to today here. I'm talking about the new age technologies, how the new age technology like geospatial and remote sensing technologies is helpful to the rural manufacturing and MSME clusters to take it into the next level, like in a global level. So coming to the geospatial technology and the remote sensing images, like satellite images and drone images, so and mapping, GIS mapping of the raw materials and the natural resources. So this will helpful to identify the, first of all, clusters, the MSME clusters. So by studying the location based information, so the location based information all together we put into the map, and that we can divide into the based on the availability of the raw material and the other resources like the manpower, like a skilled manpower or unskilled manpower. Based on that, we can segregate the clusters. In such a way, the GIS and remote sensing is useful. And apart from that, the CFC centers like warehouses and to put the labs or research labs or to put the training centers, the geospatial technology is also useful, and to identify the gaps and to optimize the routes to collect the raw materials from the farmer to the production centers. So in such a way, geospatial technology is useful. And coming to the remote sensing, what my colleague is talking about, the farmer advisories, actually we are working in a couple of customers across the pan India, and we are giving from starting farmer advisories to till end mile, till supply chain, the entire ecosystem of the agriculture. So we are using the digital technology like GIS and remote sensing technology, and we are using the IoT sensors also. We install the IoT sensors at farm level and block level to monitor the soil moisture, and we get the IoT data continuously into our system. So the everything is monitoring in a putting in a one central command control center, and through the command control center, so we are giving the advisories to the farmers. So when they have to sown, where they have to sown, and how they have to sown through the mobile application. First thing, the farmer should register the in our portal, so that and farmer while registering, no, the farmer will enter his farm boundaries and everything, so that based on that the alerts will go automatically. For example, if there is any climate risk in the next week, maybe the coming the storm is coming, so such kind of also alerts also we are working in a couple of states, the entire states, by using these newest technologies like GIS, remote sensing, and AIML, etc. And apart from that, nowadays, coming to the technology, nowadays there is a lot of rural manufacturing and MSMEs who are adopted the technology. Adopting, they are trying, they are already adopted in some of the cases. The best use case, one of the use case I saw, so one dairy development product, they were implemented the entire ecosystem from milk collection to till supply to the end mile. The entire process, the entire ecosystem, they implemented in through the GIS only. Through the GIS only. So that is one. And second use case, recently I have visited and we only implemented that that one MSME industrial area, they were adopted the digital twin technology, geo-enabled digital twin technology. So they are using the GIS maps and the GIS data. On top of that, they were installed the IoT sensors, and the IoT sensors data is continuously coming to the GIS data, and they are monitoring their utilities like energy consumption. So in that area, in that industrial cluster area, they are utilizing daily, they are monitoring daily how much energy they are consuming, the each industry. So how much power they are consuming. So what is the demand and what is the supply. So what is the gaps. These kind of data, these kind of insights is coming from the IoT sensors as well. So this is the another new age technology, the digital twin technology in the industrial area. So in such a way, we the rural manufacturing and the MSME clusters, if they adopt the new age technology, and it will be very useful to from local to the global value chain. The rural manufacturing and the MSME clusters will reach from local to global manufacturing chains.
So maybe to set the context, right? So we are looking at two aspects. You don't know? Yeah, right. So just set the context and to sum up what each of my panel members are mentioning, right? So you have two aspects in rural. One is agri and allied, and one is another is non-agri, right? And within which you have tech interventions which can enable across the value chain interventions. And as Mr. Winny also mentioned, there's also operational aspects of how do we de-risk the whole value chain, right? Now, to set I have another 15 minutes, right, to set the context again, back to the point that we have done things until now, right? It's been 70, 75 years that we have been doing things. And we are still saying that, okay, we still need to provide further impetus, right? Now, based on your experience of your domain, maybe I'll start with Mr. Yuvraj. In agriculture, what is the themes that you look at which actually need support from tech? and then de-risking, so that we can gain input from the other panelists also in that theme. And then we will probably look at non-agricultural as well, right?
Look, tech is an enabler. Tech is you need not look at tech as a product. Tech is an enabler. Tech is cross-cutting. I'll give you an example. What we're doing now with various state governments. We are setting up what we are calling open networks for agriculture. Now, what is an open network for agriculture? It is a virtual chatbot, which is in the hands of the farmer, and it lets the farmer discover and access everything starting from advisory to inputs to logistics to processing products, even markets and finance, information on the weather and mandi prices, etc. So tech is an enabler. But what are we doing with the tech? How are we linking it to all these different sort of aspects of the value chain that I just mentioned? I think that is where the real secret sauce for this lies. I'll maybe take another couple of minutes and share with you what I've seen in the last 1 year while we're doing this. So we're doing this in Western UP. We started in Mathura, now we're doing this in Amroha. Amroha is just besides Delhi, a couple of hours drive. But you see the contrast. You go from Delhi, other than the pollution, of course. You take a couple of hour drive from Delhi, and you see you feel like you're a completely different planet, a completely different universe. Their problems are different, their opportunities are different, their lifestyle is absolutely different. I think once they realized the kind of opportunities that lie beyond Amroha and that can be accessed sitting in their house or in their village through this chatbot, I think their perspective completely changed. There is a massive egg producing cluster in Amroha. They do a lot of poultry there, upwards of a few 100,000 eggs every day. So what we did is we took the founders of Eggos there. Eggos, some of us would know. I mean, in Delhi it's quite prominent. We order from there. So we were seeing if we can help farmers from Amroha through this open network connect with some of these channel partners or markets. And this is one example. We did 20 such things. So the kind of conversation these guys had with the farmers of Amroha was mind-boggling to me. And it started with the price. Then once the farmers realized that if we set up this facility in our poultry farm, it is not just Eggos, but the kind of sort of finished product that we learn, even if we disassociate with them maybe 6 months later, we'll be proper businessmen. We will not just be producing eggs, we'll be supplying eggs to the market. It's a slight difference. Look, it's a slight nuance. But I think that is where, in my opinion at least, I'm quite convinced that is where the secret sauce lies. I'll give you another example. With again Amroha. So generally the farmer sells to the mandi. You go to the mandi, you speak with the aarti. There is a very one-sided negotiation. Then you leave your produce there. Kismat ki baat hai, aaj bikta hai, kal bikta hai, kitne ka bikta hai. When you bring in external buyers, and there are several now in India, you have the likes of Pharma, Big Heart, and Dehat, and all of these. And some of them have become very big. The kind of competition that it spurs in that ecosystem, when the mandi aarti realizes that I can't take this tap for granted, maybe he'll go somewhere else. I think that is the first level of you can't call it processing, but that's the first level of realization towards becoming a businessman.
I think that's the beginning of the value chain.
Correct.
If you look at it, right?
And then from there, I think once you realize, okay, maybe my produce is worth a little more than what I always thought. Maybe my onion is not supposed to go for 3 rupees a kg.
Exactly.
Selling at Zepto for whatever we pay for it. I think that is the start of the
orientation, entrepreneurial orientation.
No, it's more than an entrepreneur
It's the
orientation.
mindset.
I think it's of course it is a mindset. There's no doubt, and all entrepreneurs want to grow and make sure that their produce is sold. But in the point at which he's talking about the top of the value chain, right, which is where bringing in data aspect comes into the picture. Now, how do I mine data and predict the data and make sure that I'm giving right inputs to the producer that, all right, this is going to be the demand for this season, right? In a country like India, not too far from here, this every year in Anantapur, tons of tomatoes are destroyed. The tomatoes are destroyed. Now there's a problem of plenty there, and then you go on the other side, the northern side of the country. You go to Bihar. We've seen last year Makana board has been set up, and then if you look at what is the root cause for setting up the Makana board? Again, the kind of a demand. It's all data that drives in. For example, you're representing World Bank, right? The data that World Bank holds or World Economic Forum holds, or for that matter, United Nations holds. If we put together all of that, I think we understand the pockets of demand alongside the seasonal trends of the demand. Now, how do you now plug the data back into the rural ecosystem of the country? And now that's where your initial starting value chain beginning of the value chain should be rather tackled with the de-risking, or rather reduce the risk, right? Now, the interesting thing is, there are a lot of, you may have to use the word urban, that I've seen urban entrepreneurs getting into the space of bridging the gap between the producer and the FPOs, right? And in fact, we've been having conversation for the last couple of years with a company called Ata Agri, where they would like to bring in data on both sides of the demand side. At the same time, they also want to make sure they are giving it to the right FPOs, right? And then because FPOs do not pay the money directly to the producer right on the day of, it's not a cash and carry, right? If there's a better money, the mandi is a different ballgame, but the new age FPOs, they wait and then they pay, right? They process and they pay. It's a mode of credit system. So when you look at the value chain part of it, the one is the risk aspect. How do you mine the data in figuring out your supply and the demand side of things? Second is, once the supply side is taken care, which is the next step, is about your produce is moved forward. The next step, and it's gone to the destination where it needs to probably reach. That's the next step, basically. I mean, from produce to its destination is the next step, right? It could be FPO or probably the godowns, depends upon what you eat. If it's a handicraft, it goes to the godowns of the companies. Now, from there, it reverses, and from there it moves to the next step. There it moves to the next step. So every time there is a movement happening from one step to another, we're creating a gap of a credit, right? Just to give you our numbers, we're talking about 10,000 crore credit gap in the country, and out of which 5,000 crores are in the MSMEs, of which 1,500 crores, I'm talking about 10,000 lakh crores, right? I'm not saying 10,000 crore, 10,000 lakh crores, and 5,000 lakh crores are with the government, of which 1,500 lakh crores are in this rural agri and agri-allied sectors. Now, this is a gap that we're talking about. Imagine what is the kind of a stressful situation this entire beginning of the value chain and the next steps of the value chain are going through. And they've sort of been living with it, right? Now, any stress that's caused during the value chain, it breaks. If it breaks, the whole thing gets breaks. And there are so many entrepreneurs involved here, right? From a farmer to the last mile guy who probably is buying again on credit and he's selling it in the last mile on a cash and carry. I'm talking about a retailer, right? For example, it's a vegetable vendor. Now, the whole set of it, we're just talking about the risk of money here, a risk of payments, right? Obviously, it all cash is the king, and then you're telling it you need the money back. Now, this is all one side of it. The other side of it is the produce is at risk. The quality, the produce is at risk because these are perishable products we are talking about, right? And when we talk about handicrafts, which are non-edible ones, and they're also at risk of transportation. Now, yeah, exactly, right? And with all that world that we're living in today, I think so much about, adulteration, and every crop, we know what stage the adulteration is happening, and probably happening at all stages, right? So if you need to bring in the standardization in the rural manufacturing, and if you really want to sell it to probably the first worlds of first worlds, or probably better, the economies that are doing better, and then they have certain obviously standards that broaden, right? Which is why we have coffee boards of the country, Makana boards of the country, agri boards of the country. But for all that reasons, how do you bring a standardization element? Now, standardization is again to do with data. So I think for a value chain, we're talking about the local to global value chains, right? A local to global value chains has three elements here for me. One is supply demand issue, which is to deal with data. Second is the cash part of it. How do I get the money back? Again, it has cash, it has a data part of it, because I don't want to sell it to a wrong guy who probably is not good with payments, right? And the third element is the how do I make sure I use the data, making sure that I'm matching the standards that are required, that basically meets my basic standards, right? Now, when these three are taken care of in the value chain, I think predominantly a farmer can spend more time, or any entrepreneur on the value chain can spend more time in growing the business rather than figuring out and firefighting with these three problems, right? There are a lot of initiatives definitely taking up shape, but I think the last piece that I'll probably leave you with is that I'll tell you interesting statistics is that, would you imagine one out of five rural agri-business or handicrafts is closing down? Like 20% of the rural manufacturing, 20% of the rural manufacturing, largely dominated by the agri or handicrafts, are closing down just because of bad debt accumulation. Cash flow problems. 1 in 5 businesses are closing down in the country. I think this is something that we need to address. If we really have to move towards self-sustainable ecosystem we want to build, not just for India, but for the world, I think this needs to be addressed. So there is so much in terms of data that is available. How do you bring it to the table of all these entrepreneurs and make it available for them through easy interfaces? Don't make them use their too much of time and brains. We have a lot of tools, provides them good visualization. Show them, look, this is the data what is talking about. This data is coming from all these sources. This is what you should be doing, or this is what you should be working with. These are the people that you probably should give credit to, or these are the standards you can follow. If you cannot find the standards, probably look for other markets. I think that's the framework that I see how the data should probably ideally play, and then in the road ahead that we're all looking for 2047. Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to complete the point I was making on the markets and sort of directing me to this local. How many of us here eat rice? All of us eat rice, right? अब आप में से कितने लोगों ने काला नमक राइस खाया? So Kala Namak rice is this variety of rice which grows in Purvanchal, which is sort of the Bahraich, Shravasti, Gorakhpur. I don't know if you know those areas. And this is an ancient variety of rice. It's also called Buddha rice. It has a very low glycemic index, and it is the tastiest rice I've ever eaten. And for hundreds of years, the cluster of Kala Namak rice has been shrinking. Very recently as 5 or 10 years ago, people have started realizing that this is something that is something we should grow as a commodity. We all eat California almond or Atlantic salmon and all of these, but हम में से 90% को काला नमक rice नहीं पता है. Now people have started forming Kala Namak rice boards. They have started teaching the farmers what you're growing and keep growing this, and they've started exporting that to Singapore. So the limited point I've been trying to make, and which I want to finish with this Kala Namak rice, is that we need to understand that there is value in what the farmer is doing. As long as an ecosystem we can add value to that product and help them connect to the markets, I think that is all we need, without sort of complicating it too much.
Maybe Srinivasa, maybe a quick note. Looking at the tech intervention specifically that you mentioned in dairy sector, right? What change did it bring in? Because dairy is one very important sector for our country, right? Thanks to the Amul, thanks to the different cooperative boards set up by them across the country. In your intervention, from your organization's standpoint, how did that intervention actually help them, right? Maybe in a very brief way, so that then we can open up for at least 2 questions or 3 questions from the audience. Over to you, sir.
So in dairy sector, actually as an organization, so we are giving the technology enablement only as of now.
Okay.
So I will take this point and
seeing that, because everybody is looking at what is the change delta, right? What happened prior to the intervention, what happened post the intervention, because now everybody is doing an evaluation analysis part of our DNA, right?
Yes.
Right? And as Yuvraj sir and Mr. Winny sir and you are mentioning, tech is an enabler. But when do we say tech is a real enabler? Is when we see the change, right? We have anecdotal evidences, we have scientific proofs, right? Coming from maybe academia, we look at scientific validations, right? To say that, okay, this has actually helped out. And looking at our journey ahead, this is just a starting point, right? Because I'm sure we will have much more opportunities for discussion. They will have much more opportunity to delve deep on other aspects of this as well, right? With this, I'll open up for questions, maybe a couple of questions. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Nasya. I actually wanted to speak about how we are talking about technology being enablers. We're talking about agriculture. We're talking about the handicrafts and handloom sector. But I think rural MSMEs and rural economy in India or world over is at a survival threat because of climate change. I mean, we are losing land and tillable land every single monsoon season or otherwise. And to your point, we are losing handicraft sector not just because there's a debt problem, of course there is, but there is a consumption problem because of capitalism and fast fashion, right? I have met handloom weavers whose children have migrated. There's nobody to take up the reins anymore. There's nobody buying stuff anymore. So there's like multitudes of problems that range beyond capital. I actually wanted to understand from you folks sitting here, if you have seen any climate resilience innovations happening with agriculture, Yuvraj, and also if you could tell me if you've seen any solutions that help solve the demand problem rather than just the capital problem with your handicrafts and handloom sector in the country.
I think let me talk about the demand problem. In fact, I had the opportunity to work in the government in my previous assignment where we've been able to create something called Center of Excellence for bringing in the global standards for handicrafts. And one of the objectives and thesis for creating that was we knew for the fact that a lot of Indian handicrafts have huge demand for globally. I think what was lacking is around marketing and global branding. There wasn't really up to the mark, and to match that, you need to have standardization, right? So it goes hand in hand. If you go and do a great advertisement, if you and people want to come and buy the product, if it's not available, then there's no point in spending money on the advertisement. But when you it's a supply chicken and egg problem, right? So the initiatives that, if you look at it, especially from a perspective of the way in the last 5-6 years, you must have observed the celebrities wearing the handlooms, to the fact that the products from places like Etikopaku, or for that matter, Kondapalli Bombalu, and they come from this part of the country, and then also the producers from Mandya in Bangalore. All of these, if you see, all of them have taken, they've understood that the problem that you rightly put it, right? We understood that problem. That problem now has to be solved with the multi-stakeholder. One of the stakeholders have to be the folks who are working in the national branding, because we, as a nation, we are identified by some of these crafts. Now you have to, put these crafts together into the core of your brand, which is our national branding. It could be your state, it could be your city, or it could be your country as such, right? I think that's the sort of exercise I think we begin to do. I think, interestingly, I come from a place called Visakhapatnam, which is about a couple of hours journey to Araku, and we've been hearing about Araku for ages and decades now. But interestingly, I think 5 years back, Anand Mahendra had set up a Araku coffee all the way in Paris. Now imagine what Araku coffee is doing now. I think you go to any of the European expos, you go and check it out. Araku coffee is out there. So I think we've just definitely made strides, and we're going to make much strides. I think the other challenge that I see, which needs to be addressed, is that how do I make sure the next generation of that handicraft entrepreneur to get into it? So how do I get him to make sure, hey, you know what, I'm not going to go out of the city. I'm going to make the Etikopaku Bamalu again, right? We've seen this interesting movie of Dhanush of Idli Kadai, We've seen that. The natural story of any rural entrepreneur across the country, in the last month of the country. I think that's something that probably we all will face in the future. And we're still facing, of course, not face in the future. We are facing it.
Because you solve poverty when you actually help rural poverty rather than help urban migration, right?
If it is only to do with poverty and money, that's fine, Lasya, but it's all about aspirations.
Yeah.
It's about what you're running for.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
that's
about
what the Green Revolution helps solve, that
it is.
You actually make rural lives better, and
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
poverty is solved better when you solve it at the rural stage than actually if you expect them to migrate to the urban cities
Right.
and solve it there.
So there's the second part of the question that
Yeah,
should be answered.
firstly, I fully agree. I think one has to look at it from creating value at the farm, and I think we have to move past the green revolution. We are now producing enough. We need to now see how we can process enough, and so that's one part of it. Second is, I think, look, everybody may not find an Anand Mahindra. So the best part is to everybody will. No, that's the truth.
No, I agree.
Maybe a fraction of the 1% will. But what you can do to address the larger population is to expose them to these options or these propositions that they may find, and for that technology is important. But I think on de-risking climate, look, that's a different ballgame altogether. Parametric insurances, forecasts, etc. All of those are there now. So it's not a silver bullet, but we are slowly moving towards that. So
I will add
solve
another
itself.
example. Since we are talking about, say, industrialists taking up the task, right? There's an entity, Jaipur Rugs. I think me and Yuvraj were discussing this, right? It's an entrepreneur-driven activity where they attempted to organize the whole sector of carpet manufacturers and then brand it globally, right? So it can be top-down, it can be bottom-up, right? It can be any one of us sitting here, may not be sitting here, right? So there's another organization trying to, I'll come to you. Another organization working in Telangana Andhra region known as Bohemia Innovation. They're trying to have more tillable land, since you mentioned climate change, right? So they are trying to remove rocks and make the land tillable. How did that person identify the whole context? It's a very interesting story of Deepak Kungari, right? It's a very interesting story because he himself faced that problem. And that led to an entrepreneurial intervention. Now it's going global, right? Over to you, sir. Maybe 90 seconds is what Rohan told me. You can ask the question and then we'll wrap it up.
All right. I'm just talking about the themes in agriculture that needs. I mean, we are obviously providing an open network for agriculture to raise opportunities for people who want to know their worth. But as I've seen how the generation has been passing on, and farmers are like, maybe the next generation doesn't want to get into farming, but they want to get into the more technical part of the work apart from the physical work. So how do we keep that from not happening and providing ecological ways to deal with this situation?
Anyone of you take it?
Simple answer is we need more poster boys.
Or what, sorry?
We need more poster boys. We need poster boys. I think it's a socially responsible cause that one needs to understand, right? I think initiatives that we talk about.
I mean, like, the government is also giving us subsidies.
Exactly. So that's a problem. We always sort of look at government needs to do something and government needs to provide subsidy. We always sort of bank upon the government. I think the whole culture as such, I'm not blaming anyone. I still come from the 90s, I've grown up in 90s, 80s kid. So, but this is a whole generation that we're looking at as, support, ecosystem. I think we should be that. But there are a few of them, right? I think the poster boys will come through because one of the poster boy has reverse migrated, Sridhar Vembu, right? For me, he is the hero of making the next poster boys for the country. Because we all live in city. We know cities like Hyderabad and all of that. We know these cities are unsustainable. They're not. But the problem is that on the other side of the world, as you pointed out, there ecosystems are not supportive. It's not only with the poverty issue. Poverty is only one part of it. In fact, that is being taken care by the subsidy. That is being taken care by giving grants and so on and so forth. But beyond that, how do you build ecosystem? How do you build model villages, right?
We could start with how Rajasthan is building, giving 100% subsidies to hydroponic plants, which is raising governments to disregard the ecosystems of places. So we could start with that technology as well.
Absolutely. And people are saying, if you want to, for all the reason, the only solution, if we don't do that, we have to probably, Elon Musk will probably build robots, instead of people who will go and farm.
Yes.
People like Elon
So
Musk
I think,
have to do that.
maybe not from the agriculture sector, I'll give you a poster boy who was identified, Mitti Cool.
Yeah, Mitti Cool, yeah.
Right. So thanks to Grassroots Innovations Augment Network or the Honeybee Network, they put in the effort, right? Maybe again, the onus is on us, right? How do we make them realize that, okay, please don't leave your profession or occupation and continue doing it. We are there to support you, right? Across board. I'm not just saying as an academician, but across board, even all of you are part of the game, right? You were saying something?
No, look, I just wanted to give a quick response. Agriculture is physical. You can't do agriculture on your phone.
No, I mean, like,
Agriculture
Exactly.
is physical. That's the very nature of the profession. And
they're not
hydroponics
supporting
is not going to solve your problem. It's a very boutique kind of an initiative, so it will remain like that.
Or as a country, we've always been inspired and dragged by the West. They sold sugar, we had sugar. They're selling reels, we're consuming it. All right, both are bad for us. One for a physical, another for a mental. For now, if we have to do, probably get aspired. I want to stay back in rural, then probably we have to find something to come from the West.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Please go ahead. Yeah, the organizer saying we can go ahead with another question. Please go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, we
Thanks.
can take both and answer together.
Okay, fine.
I just wanted to know, when you were talking about technologies for the farmer, the advisory and all of that, how are they paying for it currently, and what is like the willingness to pay, and also any new like financing structures or ways in which farmers can sort of adopt this, like any kinds of different payment structures that you're trying out?
No, the farmer is no need to pay. The government is paying.
So this is one example of what they're
Yeah.
doing in Gujarat. There are several examples where farmer is paying for advisory. But to your question, the willingness to pay is very low. It is only with the very high value horticulture farmers that they pay for advisories, and overall the willingness is very low, and there is no government subsidy.
So how can you be sure that the intervention that you're making or the advisory support that you're providing is of actual value to the farmer?
Well, they'll only find out once they take the advisory and try it out. It's impossible to forecast.
But there are advisories which are mining the data from a global perspective, because I've come across some interesting advisories, right? So this is again with smaller entrepreneurs, might not be the rural. So there's a small component manufacturers of electrical switches and all of that. Now IoT is picking up, and then all of this. So there is a whole set of data of the last 30 years we mined. What could be the shelf life of a demand for IoT switches? So it doesn't make sense for an entrepreneur to put money in creating an assembly line, for example.
But-
I'm just giving an example. Such kind of a data backed ones, like he's pointed out, definitely worth than.
But just to add to my sort of cheeky remark, look, from what I've seen, if you can guide the farmer as to what a certain market would look like maybe 6 months later at the time of harvest, if you can guide them as to when to sow based on the weather, if you can guide them in when to harvest, when to store, I think that is basic sort of advisory which does add value.
That advisory is already being given by the
Correct,
government to
correct.
the farmers. Individual farmers are given those messages about the IMD
Correct.
and other things. But is there-
No, but advisory, madam, would be slightly more actionable than IMD sort of weather
other
forecast.
things are also
Because
given for the MSPs and everything is there.
that is true.
But still,
Ownership of the startup providing advisory. I've given advice, but how can I ensure that it's actually worked in a good way for the farmer? There's no sort of
That's a
guarantee.
gray area. That's a gray area. We have to call it a gray area. That is a gray area.
There is no guarantee, but we are receiving the feedbacks from the farmers.
It's an evolving
what we are
process.
giving the advisories. So whether it is really is working or not, we are getting the feedbacks from the farmers. So in fact, we are working from the last 3 years in one of the state. In the first year, whatever we have given the advisories, so it was successful rate is 60 to 65%, and it is increased the second year, and now it is more increased because of the data. We collected the data. We have the data, based on the data, so you can give the more reliable advisories. So it will refine every year by year the advisories. Sorry.
That's a completely different ballgame.
I think you should probably take it offline.
Maybe last question.
Thank you. So I've heard a lot of that in order to get any kind of rural commodity into the global market, we need to have multiple stakeholders in play. One needs to do marketing, another needs to continue to enable the technology to the farmers, and also we need to have a proper financial modeling with even government stakeholders involved, state governments involved, to build everything such that it lasts for 10 years, 20 years, and then grows further to the next generation, like how you mentioned. So my question is that we even spoke about how urban entrepreneurs are trying to get into the field and bridge the gap between FPOs and the other markets. So my question is, as an urban entrepreneur, is my goal only to do the market linkage, or is it what is the most viable solution as an urban entrepreneur? Is it my job? is it my ideal, is the ideal case where I work towards multiple stakeholders to build the right financial models, connect the market linkages, and provide the technology? Or should I have different stakeholders for each of these verticals so that each of them get taken care of and they grow in their own sense?
So are you asking as an entrepreneur or as a farmer?
I'm asking as an entrepreneur.
As an entrepreneur, it is completely your prerogative, completely your duty to figure out what problem you're trying to solve.
So
You
let's.
cannot solve for the whole value.
I agree. Let's take a particular value chain. Let's say you've taken the case of eggs, for example. If we remember, eggs per capita consumption was close to 50 eggs per year in 1980s, and post the NECC intervention, it became more than 180, 200 eggs per year per capita. So now for similar market, let's say a higher value crop like mushrooms, for example, special mushrooms, for example, it's a $2.5 billion industry in India. But out of that, 90% is just white button mushrooms. And so the exotic and special mushrooms are less than 5%, whereas China in the global market is more than 80% of the market share. So in order to grow something like that in India, what would an entrepreneur or a group of entrepreneurs have to do? Because it's never going to be a single entrepreneur do the job. It's a large economy. It's a large demand market out there. But the crucial pain point is that when we have multiple stakeholders in play, what is the crucial role of the entrepreneur? What is the crucial role of the government? What is the crucial role of financing or banking authorities?
I think, see, to start with your pain point, right? I think the pain point should always be backed by data, right? And entrepreneurship is not a job, it's a passion, right? I think you need to figure out that, all right, if you want to solve the problem, right now the problem is too small, but the problem may become bigger. Do you have enough patience to stay until the problem going to get bigger? Not everybody can probably be Sridhar Vembu, who will wait for 30 plus years to reach what it is, right? So it's a very, very personal driven aspiration as an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur can be big, large, small as well, right? There's nothing called, what do you call, if you're a small, you will not be called as an entrepreneur. That's not how it is. Everybody's an entrepreneur. So when you talked about this particular problem of the mushrooms, right? You talked about 10% of the exotic mushrooms aren't really up in the market today. Or in fact, even you go to the premium restaurants or the hotels, you still don't really find them as one of the common things. So which is where I think how does this demand picks up and the trend picks up? Classic case study for you would be to understand that part of it is a premium snacks like makana, for example. It's a costlier food, but how did that whole journey happen in the last 5 years, right? That's one way to look at it. Second aspect is about when anything that you deal with food, which is to do with the wet, the freshness. Makana is a snack. It's a completely directly can be consumed, ready to eat. It's end product. When you talk about a mushroom, it is not. So there is an element of process that needs to happen. So when you talk about such products, the entry point market development becomes challenging. Classic case is ID batter, right? First time an ID batter started putting up the packaging, the colorful packaging where you can't see what is inside, the challenge started. But then how did they solve it? They created that small patch of transparency. I think it is to do with a lot of it, perception based. So therefore, wherever the food, which is not ready to eat, where there is a sort of a perception based in terms of a buying and understanding where the buy button, the pain point, deeper penetration of understanding the data is very important as an entrepreneur, because you have to know what you're getting into. Because once you dive into it, you should not be looking at coming out of it. You have to survive, no matter how big the version is. If you have that kind of a passion, you should probably get into such kind of fields. Otherwise, you should probably be figuring out, okay, this is not for me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Winny sir, for that answer. I'm afraid that was the last question of the session.